Welcome to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Saravalli and Jason Greger on dailyfaceoff.com. Delivered by DoorDash.
Welcome to episode 64, David Camp episode of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Greger alongside Frank Saravalli, and the rundown, of course, is brought to you by Fantrax. Go to fantrax.com/DFO Rundown. You can register your team. You can win an autographed Nathan MacKinnon jersey. Now, Fantrax, for those who don't know what it is, if you're a fantasy player, you want to set up your league, maybe you want to be the commissioner, you want to control things, you can set up your league, challenge your buddies, whether you play in a keeper league, whether you just play in a one-time draft league, dynasty league, they got it all. Fantrax, that's TRAX.com. Frank, how you doing?
I'm good, Jay. Were you the commissioner in your fantasy leagues? I feel like you might want to have a little control there.
You know what? I'm actually only in one big fantasy football league, and I'm the associate commish. I got voted the associate, but we have our commissioner, and I wouldn't want to be the commissioner of our fantasy football league. It's quite serious, number one, and there's a lot of work to it. It's got to organize everything. So I just get to rule on trades to ensure that there's no collusion amongst guys, because there's a few degenerates. So you always have to question some trades. But that's
Quite
pretty much
serious.
it.
Like, doesn't that defeat the purpose?
What do you mean?
Well, like if the league is quite serious, like isn't it supposed to be for fun?
Well, it's 500 bones a guy to play. So it,
Okay.
First place gets, I don't know, I think it's like 3,500 at the end of the year. Plus there's lots of other stuff. It's more the side bets, to be honest. I think we have more side bets after the draft as far as, which team you think you outscore points and stuff than there's actually there. So it's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't want to be the commissioner. There's no chance. If our commissioner stepped down, I would not volunteer.
Okay. All right. I got it.
But I do like, I like to keep on top of things, but no, being the commish is not, I don't, Bettman doing it for 32 owners who all have very different ideas, I could think at times would be rather stressful. We do it in a group of 12 where, let's be honest, there's really not that much to argue about, other than if you think that everybody thinks the trade they didn't make is bad. That's what I always laugh about, right? I think I've only ever vetoed one trade in 12 years because it was painfully, obviously biased. But every other one, I'm like, hey, if you can screw over another GM because he's not smart, I don't blame the smart GM in that case.
Right. So yeah, you just let almost everything go through as long as there's no collusion.
100%. Like, all you got to do is look at the NHL. Peter Chiarelli can show you that sometimes guys can make bad trades. It happens.
I mean, look, almost every GM at some point or another has a black mark on their record.
Oh, one that doesn't pan out or down the road. But there's some at the time of the trade is made, and you're pardoned like, what? Why did you do that? But the thing is, Frank, as one person's garbage is another man's treasure.
This is true. Trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah. So now you were just back from Chicago. At the what's the official term that you guys?
The NHLPA North American Player Media Tour. They usually do one in Europe and one in the US. This year with COVID, just happy to get the Player Media Tour back going again. They did one day stop in Toronto for all the Canadian teams, and then all the players from the US based teams, they all came to Chicago for a 3 to 4 day jaunt. Lots of stuff going on with two new rights holders in the mix, ESPN and Turner. A lot of those gladiator shots you see, the shots in the dark rink and all the other stuff that you see in promos, that all gets filmed during that week. And so there's an on-ice portion, then there's an off-ice portion. You go through different rooms. We call it the car wash. Daily Faceoff had us set up with a couple other traditional media outlets. We shared a room, and we were really happy to be there. But, guys you stay in one room, and every 15 minutes, a guy from another team comes in and pops in and stays with you for 15 before moving on to the next one. So for them, it's like a car wash. They just keep going through. You get to talk to a lot of different prominent players from around the league. So this is a great week for Daily Faceoff, and also some news. We should bring in Tyler Yaremchuk, who was with us at the Player Media Tour and got a chance to ask a lot of questions, a lot of which will be turning into some YouTube content down the line. But Tyler, what was your impression?
Well, I mean, like for me, I've never really been to an NHL sanctioned media event like that. So that was just a cool experience in general to kind of see how things sort of operate at those behind the scenes. And yeah, we got some cool sort of more fun content that I was able to ask some players about that will turn into some YouTube videos here before the beginning of the season. But for me, I just thought, you always kind of hear from an outsider perspective that, all players hate doing media. Players just give cliche answers, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't actually find that to be the case. I thought every guy, or pretty much every guy who rolled through our kind of station, was like really personable. And I think in a weird way, and we talked about this with a few of them, Frank, I think some of them are kind of a little bit happy to have media back face to face, and they don't have to do the whole like, sorry, your Zoom call cut out kind of shit.
Right. And I think that's part of it. Part of it too is like they also know going in, like I have 2 or 3 full days of media. I better be on my game, so to speak. It's not like, it's day 57 in the dressing room and you're doing the same scrum over and over again, looking at the same people. It was new, it was fresh, first time in a couple of years. And in addition to that, you're right. I think a couple guys, although they probably liked getting a break more often last season with the Zoom environment, hey, I only have to do media 1 day this week or 2 days this week, that it just makes life easier for a lot of people, including teams and PR staffs, to have the media just enter the room if possible.
Now, see, this is why, Frank, I should be the commissioner. Because when we welcome in Tyler to the woodjerseys.com studio, okay, brought to you by Wood Jersey. So thanks for coming in, Ty. And I know our friends at Wood Jerseys, it's awesome. Frank's got the Toronto one. I got the Boston one. Ty's got a special one coming. I don't know where it is. It must be very, very special. But if you want to get any team, you can go check it out, woodjerseys.com. They got them all there. Now, the other thing about the players being personable, I do think at the same time, the smart players who understand the league's still a business as much as they love hockey. And hockey, especially in the US, you have a few new partners. You want to give your fans I don't know how many people in my life in the last 6 months are suddenly F1 fans. I don't know if it's the same for you, Frank, in the US, but like my wife literally Sunday mornings now, she records the race because it usually starts at 7, so she doesn't want to be up there. But now we have breakfast downstairs. My son, who loves cars, like I've taken him out to racing since he's 4. He's just like a race freak, so he loves it. We now have our 5 picks between the 3 of us every week. And it's only because of that they got to know the people. Right? It's not the sport of racing that drew you in. It was the documentary on Netflix. And I would hope that NHL players recognize, like, there are some guys with really good personalities and lots of fun stories. Fans who are like, people who are listening to our pod are diehard hockey fans. We know that. So we try to welcome in non-hockey fans too. And the NHL, and I hope the players, like if I'm the head of the PA, I'm sitting down and say, hey, fellas, we've had a flat cap for a few years. It's not just magically going to skyrocket if we're just robotic in our responses and don't give people stuff. And at the same time, I've always taken the response that an interview is 50% on the player and 50% on the interviewer. If you ask 100%. Crappy questions, you're going to get shitty answers. So part of it's on the media as well, who the individual media person, to take pride in what they're doing. And you can get players. Over the years, I've had great interviews with guys, and some players just are never going to be comfortable on the mic. So I kind of avoid them unless I have to, because you know what? And I tell them at the start of the year, I said, dude, I know you don't really like it. So you know what? We'll do it a few times.
I'm not going to bug you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find it works out better. Like some people are just more natural, they don't mind doing the interviews. They're smart. They like to say stuff. Well, smart's maybe
I think the problem is the biggest marquee players in the game, more or less, are those players that don't like doing media, which I think is part of the problem. Some of them, but a lot of times the most engaging, outgoing, interesting players on the team aren't your big, top line players. It's pretty rare that happens. And so, there needs to probably be a little buy-in on the player side, as you mentioned. I think what you're going to see this year is more of a willingness from the team side, because they also get it. We've had a long year. We've had teams that need to dig out of a little bit of a hole financially. And the only way to generate more revenue is to make your team more interesting. And how do you do that? Well, part of it is content and putting your players, personalities out there, which they all have them. It's just that 99% of the time we don't get to see them.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I look at a guy like Austin Matthews. You know what? There's lots of different things. Like he's one of the league's best goal scorers. I find Matthews pretty engaging. Leon Draisaitl, I like to call him the grumpy German. And I've had really good interactions with Leon over the years, and we've had battles over the years as well. But when you ask him a like repetitive answer and something that he's like, hey, how was tonight? Like that's what bores him. But if you get Draisaitl into stuff, he's pretty personable. Like you saw. Like I saw him, like even he couldn't get McDavid laughing, which shows you, Connor's pretty serious all the time. When Leon was like, well, who do you want to thank other than me? Like that's still one of the best lines from a hockey player. It's like a subtle, good chirp. And I think there are guys around like Patrick Kane has always, Ovechkin's got a real big personality, but you're right, Frank. I find that some of it was a little bit the team and then being like, hey, don't give too much information. I'm like, we're not asking for you to tell us, what your secret forecheck is tonight. Because 99%.
First off, no one cares. Right.
Exactly. Right. They don't care.
One of the things I found interesting kind of along those lines as well is I felt like if we started with a player, Frank, and we had like some lighthearted ones, like Ryan Clark from The Athletic was there. He had a couple of great stories. He was asking about that, had the guys really kind of laughing and thinking. Like from there, you got better answers for the serious stuff when you had it lighthearted at first. So that's like a nerdy.
Gotta warm them up.
Yeah,
it's not unlike anything else. Like you have to, give and
take.
It's
called foreplay of interviewing people. It's basically it works.
I was going there, but not going there. So thank you.
One of the best stories we asked about though that had kind of the room going was the Nathan MacKinnon one though, right, Frank?
Yeah. So we kind of got halfway through the interview, and I had to ask about what unfolded this summer on social media. I don't even know why it became a thing. It was
Zadorov was the one who brought it up.
Exactly. But I don't know why that took off. It suddenly became, I must have been slow. There's nothing else going on in hockey at the time. And all of a sudden you turn around, that thing has 12,000 retweets and you're like, how did this happen? And it was basically just, if you haven't or weren't, don't remember it, it was basically Zadorov telling stories about, Nathan MacKinnon got rid of ice cream. He got rid of pizza and soda and all these different things from our post-game locker room spread. And I don't know why that, all of a sudden people were sort of criticizing MacKinnon, like, oh, look at this guy. He's militant. He's this, he's that. I loved it. Like, and so I had to ask about it. I think he knew it was coming at a certain point, and he was like, okay, here we go. And then he didn't hold back. He called Zadorov a donkey first off, and then just kind of, jumped into it. It was like, hey, like I'm a regular guy. I'm not crazy. And, we had fun with it because that's what it should be. But I also think, not to take a serious right-hand turn, but I actually think that the way that he's changed himself and his habits have made a big impact on his game, and actually are the reason why he's turned into the elite of the elite in the NHL. Because when you ask him about it, the time frame that he decided to make those decisions with his diet and with his nutrition and the other changes he made in his life is exactly the time that he started to take off and go from a 55, 60 point player to a 95, 100 point player. And so it probably actually means something.
Oh, of course it does. Well, here's the easiest analogy. When a certain car you buy, there's different levels of gasoline. You want to put in the supreme gas, it runs better on a high-powered engine. If you want to be a high-powered athlete now, you have to eat right basically 95% of the time. Right? That's just how it is. And most people don't want to do it. Like, I think the reason that becomes such a big story is most people in society can't do it. Like, if we're going to be bluntly honest here, look at North America. Sadly, we're, one of the biggest obese continents in the world, right? That's just fact. And so I'm
over here waving if you can't see me. Like,
yeah. But it's true
is a temple if you didn't know.
Yeah, but it's easier to stop in and have the processed food, right? And so I give him credit. Like, and the thing is, when MacKinnon does it, it's a leader on your team, and most of those other players are probably eating right 90% of the time. But I get why he's like.
But after the game, they're like, I want a slice of pizza because I just worked my bag off for 3 hours, and I need something delicious. Like,
and once in a blue moon would be fine. But if it was every game, well, that's 80 times a year, right? Like, I don't even, Tyler Yaremchuk, when he was single, wasn't eating pizza 80 times a year, right?
No.
So I get why you wouldn't have pizza after every game, right? It just doesn't make sense.
And to be fair, when I first started covering the NHL, that's how it was.
Oh, I know.
When every stop you were in, if it was Buffalo, it would be wings. If it was, somewhere with good pizza, it'd be pizza. Somewhere else, it'd be, in Philly, they would always get cheesesteaks delivered for the road team. Like, they did not eat incredibly well after games. Now it's when you walk in the room, it's they've got a shake ready to go. They drink it right after, then they're right into their workout, and then they're on to the next thing. And then, kind of a little bit before my time, but not really, like right towards the very beginning of when I started covering the league, it'd be like, hey, some guy would be finishing riding the bike and you'd be interviewing him, and then he'd crack open a Coors Light. Like that just, it doesn't happen anymore.
No.
There's guys that don't drink the entire season.
Yeah.
Not one drink.
Yeah, they don't drink.
Even though
They'll drink
that's
in the
rare,
off season.
but-
Yeah,
yeah.
and I understand that. And now on the other side of things, I think the fact that the players can never go out and blow some steam off without everybody, having a phone, like that would be stressful too. Like there's nothing wrong if you eat, and I've had a lot of dietitian nutritionists on my show that tell you you're allowed to have a cheat day every now and then, even as elite level athlete. And so if they want to go blow off some steam and have a few vodka sodas or beers or whatever it is, I kind of think that today's athlete in the NHL, they don't get to enjoy the fun of what it should be in the offseason. Now, I'm not talking you have to go like code 10 red of, obliterating yourself every night or anything like that. But I think it's harder for today's athlete to go out and just, these athletes are 21, 22, 25. Every other guy or gal at 22 to 25 is they're in college or you're just out. You're living up your best life. You at least should be able to go out and socialize without feeling scrutinized and everybody videoing you. I'm just not a fan of that.
Yeah, no, I agree on the video part, but like the discipline part is like, you're getting paid a supreme amount of money in a very limited time window. You can have all the drinks you want after your career's over. You can do all the things that you want to do socially after your career's over. But in the meantime, you're getting paid, superhero money. It's, not unreasonable to ask to have the discipline component to it.
Jack Hughes had a funny answer along those lines. I forget who it was but he was asked kind of like, did you miss out on the college experience? And he kind of chuckled and was like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, I was making a lot of money playing hockey, like
He
missing
said,
class.
I was 18 and I was making $1 million playing hockey. He's like, pretty sure I made the right choice.
Yeah. No, I'd look at though, if you go out on a Friday night, you don't play again till Monday. I think if you go out Friday once every 2 months, I don't think that means you're undisciplined.
No. And I think they mark those calendars way ahead of time. This night specifically is a green light special.
Oh, it should be. You got to have some fun. Like, my goodness, if you're making all your money and never get to go have some fun, blow off some steam, that would be brutal.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an Olympic year coming up, and a couple of the players we had interesting conversations about that with were Drew Doughty and Steven Stamkos. Doughty, one, is still actively checking all of the projected rosters to make sure he's included on them, and I thought that was hilarious. And Stamkos is motivated as well to try crack that Canadian team.
Yeah, Doughty was particularly interesting because not only is he still, motivated and fired up by some of those projections, almost all of which have seemingly left him off. Drew Doughty had a sneaky good season last year. Like, he was way better last year than he was in his previous two before that. I think he's going to be in the mix and certainly in the conversation. And then Steven Stamkos is so fascinating. Like, and he walked us through the entire timeline, some of which, if you're not following super closely, you may have forgotten. 2010 in Vancouver, he had a 95-point season that year. He was left off. He actually led the league in goals. He was one of the last cuts. He was 19 years old, and he missed out then. 2014, he had an injury. I think he broke his leg.
Yep.
And then 2018, the NHL players don't go. And now we get to 22, and he's 31. He turns 32 while he would be in Beijing. And he's sort of at this point in his career now where he's not the super high producing player that he once was. He's also dealt with a lot of injuries. His best days may be behind him. And he's saying, am I in the mix? I want to be in the mix. How can I get off to a great start this season to prove that I should be? It's the one thing that's really missing from his career: 2 Stanley Cups, 2 Rocket Richards, World Junior Gold. He's done almost everything you can do in your career without, getting on that Olympic team and winning gold. And so he'd have an unbelievable chance with Team Canada. And Jay and Tyler, we should have some fun with this after it happens. And once the team is picked, I'm going to mark it down on my calendar. We should write a story about what would the second entry from Team Canada look like if they could put 2 in the Olympics. And Steven Stamkos, his prediction, it was offhand. He just mentioned it casually. He said, I think the second Team Canada team would also medal in Beijing.
I mean, I'm looking at a projected roster right now that doesn't even have the likes of Stamkos or Doughty on it. And I mean, the extra defensemen on this team are Morgan Rielly and Dougie Hamilton. It's from the early projection from The Athletic. And it's like, yeah, just looking at the extra players and off the top of my head going, this guy, and this guy aren't there. Like, man, they'd be really good. I don't know if they could compete with like Sweden, though, if that's who you're kind of battling with, or Russia or the US for another medal spot, but they'd be good.
Well, I think the other thing you have to take into consideration is experience matters in those type of tournaments. It's a different scenario than it is in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And how many guys from the 2014 are locks? Probably Crosby, Pietrangelo. After that, like Drew Doughty's not a lock, but I think he'll be in the conversation. Marchand wasn't there, but he played in the World Cup. Patrice Bergeron, is he a lock? I don't know if he's a lock, but so I think they will look, a guy like Drew Doughty, as Frank alluded to last year, quietly had a good season. And LA's got a lot of young players, but a lot of people think LA could surprise early on this year. And I think every year players are looking for different motivation, right? There's probably no one better than the example of Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan just found something to motivate him every time. If he would make up things that people would say almost in his head, and it would twist the words, because that's how he got motivated. And I wonder if a guy like Doughty or Stamkos looks and says, okay, it's November 9th, whatever, it's my 13th season, we're playing some non-divisional team, but I'm going to get fired up because the big picture is I want to play well, but I also want, for a pride factor, to be in that consideration. And it's fascinating. I wonder if the best players in the National Hockey League this year are off to better starts and are a little bit more engaged maybe in the kind of the dog days, because they all want to make their national teams.
I'm just looking at the 2014 Canada roster from Sochi. I think you're right. It's Crosby,
Pietrangelo,
Bergeron, maybe, and that's kind of it. Is Tavares in the mix if he gets off to a good start?
But Carey Price is Carey
Price and the goalie. Maybe. That's it. Yeah.
But the other thing,
Carey Price is, after getting the Habs to the final last year, I think he's a lock.
I think Olympic experience is one thing as well. But if you're going to look at a team that's going to have, especially on the blue line, like if you have Jacob Chychrun, Cale Makar, maybe a Thomas Chabot playing, I think that almost increases the odds of them going, you know what, let's take a Drew Doughty over a Dougie Hamilton because he has that, quote unquote Stanley Cup experience. I'm not saying that's what I would do, but I could see that being kind of the rationale and the thinking behind bringing on a guy like Doughty, and maybe even a Steven Stamkos, a guy who has that pedigree of winning before, if you're surrounding him with a lot of young, talented players.
No, I'm going to say right now, I think the odds of those 3 young guys, Chabot, Chychrun, and Makar, all being on the team, slim to none. You're not going to go with that much inexperience, I believe, and overall in international play, inexperience for those teams. And here's the other thing, guys.
I think Makar is a stone.
Oh, Makar's a lock. I
think Chychrun's a lock too.
Oh, I don't think Chychrun's a lock.
He's not a lock, but he's definitely right there. And then who was the third guy? Chabot. Chabot, I think, is a lock too.
You have Chabot as a lock over a guy like Jacob Chychrun. Jacob Chychrun didn't he score the most goals by a defenseman last year? I know that.
Yeah,
doesn't
he did have 18
matter.
goals last year. Yeah.
And we saw him at the Player Media Tour. He's built like a freaking tight end, man. He is huge.
He is big. You have to look at the other thing, though, that I think they'll consider is Chychrun and Chabot, not by anything in their own accord. They've never played in any remote meaningful games in their NHL career because their teams haven't been close.
They've played like Chabot, for instance, was playing 28, 29 minutes a night in World Juniors on home ice. Like, to say that he doesn't have big game experience, I think is
in the
NHL. But okay. I mean, I don't know. I just think those guys, the way they skate, the way they play, that they're going to be right there. Well, by the way, I not to go too far down the Olympic rabbit hole, but I mean I still think this is Team USA's year. This is their year to win.
Well, you know what? The Russia is always intriguing, although their defense core is going to be their question. Their goaltending, they got the best depth of goal. It's not even close. And they've obviously got some guys who can score up front. Russia's concern is on the fence. Sweden's concern, I don't know if they have the top end offensive guys. Canada and US right now, if I was handicapping it going in, I would have Canada 1 and the US 2. I don't there's much debate on that. Yeah. And it'll be fascinating to see how the rosters play out. And really, I think, guys, health could be a factor because every year there's some guys, we mentioned, some guys who are injured, and a key injury to one of those nations could be the difference maker in who wins gold.
Well, the other thing to point out, by the way,
Eichel?
Oh, that's a good question. He'd probably need to have surgery now, soon, in order to be in the mix for the Olympics. Unless he's planning on playing through it.
Yeah. Speaking of Jack Eichel, I know Vegas just signed Nolan Patrick. If you're the Vegas Golden Knights and you look at how many big moves they've made over the few years in their brief existence, and you look at their center depth right now, I just don't see them having Stanley Cup center depth. They've got a lot of depth in a lot of places. The problem is they don't have a ton of young guys. Can they make a package that would entice Buffalo to trade them Jack Eichel? And if you're Vegas, is that the missing piece to your team?
I don't think there's any question that it's the missing piece. They need that center. They don't have it. The top end elite center, number one guy. The problem is if you're the Buffalo Sabres, what are you getting from the Vegas Golden Knights that's going to entice you to do it? And there'd probably have to be a third-party team involved in order to broker it and make it happen, no?
Well, probably a couple, right? Because if Buffalo doesn't want roster players in this move and they're looking for just young talent, well, Vegas, to make the cap work, you'd have to move two of Carlson, Marchessault, Riley Smith, or Evgeny Dadonov, and 3 of those guys have modified no-trade clauses. So there's no way any of those guys are saying, yeah, I'll leave Vegas to go to rebuilding Buffalo. You'd have to find a third team to probably take each of those guys, give you future assets. Maybe Buffalo holds money in the deal, but then maybe you can make it work. But I just think money-wise, and with the big money players Vegas has, almost all having no trade protection, how could you swing that?
That's a fair point, but
I mean, that's so. Then when you look at the Dadonov signing this summer,
yep,
that to me, I was like,
it was pointless.
Well, I was like, that was an indication to me that the trade, excuse me, not a signing, the trade. That to me was an indication that they're probably not in the mix for Eichel. Why are you taking on that $5 million deal when you know that's half of an Eichel cap wise? So I wonder. I'd have to sit back and think about the third party team and how that could factor in and, look at a team. I wonder about a team like the New York Rangers. And I say that because I think they're interested in Eichel also. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They have been from the beginning. They just haven't been willing to pay what Buffalo believes is the price. They've got a specific, set idea in mind, but the reason I bring up Vegas and the Rangers is I don't think they're done trading yet. Maybe it doesn't come to fruition now, but you got to keep the Gerard Gallant factor in mind. They bring in Ryan Reeves. I think that they probably at a certain point had interest in a Smith or Marchessault, and that didn't come to fruition. But I think Vegas they're ready and willing to move at least one of those guys, as Tyler pointed out, to make it happen. Those guys have definitely been out there in trade talks.
Yeah, like Riley Smith is in the final year of his contract. He doesn't have a no move. There's $5 million, so that's one guy you could move. If Vegas wanted to, you throw in Peyton Krebs. You would look at maybe they probably maybe want a draft pick on top of that. But the other thing is I don't think Buffalo is going to get as much as they expect to get. Right? Let's be realistic. When Chris Pronger got traded. Right? What did they get? They got a future first rounder because they won the cup that turned out to be Eberle. They had Ladislav Schmid and Joffrey Lupul and another first rounder, right? And none of those guys at that point were really established. So sure that, you want to shed some salary to make it work for Vegas. You'd have to do that. But ultimately, I'm hearing some of these trade requests for Jack Eichel, and like Buffalo can ask for the moon, but historically, when you look at big names being traded, it never like other than Eric Lindros, who was young, who wasn't injured, and was a freakish body that no one had ever seen, that big and that skilled and that physical, and they gave up a ton to get him. But other than that, like what superstar was their massive amount of play? Heck, Wayne Gretzky.
Jaromir Jagr, the trade from Pitt to Washington is one of the worst ever.
Yeah, like there's not, I think that, like I've been, 4 or 5 players, and I'm like, yeah, if you include draft picks, great. But we all know that not every draft pick works out. So I think that some people
lose almost every time trading a player like Jack Eichel.
Oh, you're going to lose, but the expectations that you're going to get all of these assets for Jack, and I like Jack Eichel, but history tells us when you look at really dominant players who are traded, you're not getting 5 or 6 pieces. Lindros was the massive outlier. It's just not how it works.
Well, there's just so many things working against Buffalo. We've talked about one of them, which is the cap. We didn't really touch on the injury situation. And then, of course, the clear and obvious request and disdain for staying in Buffalo. Like all 3 of those things make it really difficult for the Sabres to extract value in exchange for Jack Eichel. And, we've got just a few days here before players are supposed to report. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens to, in Buffalo. Is Jack Eichel there for physicals? What's going on there?
Let's get to buy or sell now, Ty.
Yeah, let's do it. We were talking about the Rangers there, and that lines up nicely because today we're going to be continuing our division preview series on buy or sell with a look at the Rangers division. We will start with them in the Metro. Last year, the Rangers had a goal differential of +20, and that was actually better than 4 playoff teams around the league. This year, their schedule is, a little bit more wide open. You're going to play everyone around the league. I think that'll benefit them, and I think it'll get them into the playoffs in a very tight Metro division. Rangers to make the playoffs. Frank, you buying or selling?
Selling. I like the Rangers. I like where they're heading. I like the strides they made last year. I know they got off to a tough start last year, and it took a while to rebound. Their goal differential, as good as it was a little bit misleading in the sense that they had a couple blowout games. We talked about this previously. Yeah. The Rangers, I remember one night beat the Flyers 9-0. I mean, that's a whole half of what you're talking about. I just think some of the other teams in that division are too strong. Carolina, the Islanders, and Wash, I think, are the 3 playoff teams that are guaranteed. And then it's going to come down to Philly, Pitt, and the Rangers then for that last spot or 2. So I still think the Atlantic is getting 5. So that leaves 3, right, from the Metro.
Yeah.
So
that means none of those 3.
Yeah. So I just think it's tough sledding for the Rangers.
5 in the Atlantic. Interesting. I'm actually going to buy on the Rangers because I think Pittsburgh's injuries to Malkin and Crosby, even if Crosby's only out a few weeks to start the season, I just think that's going to be too much for them to overcome. So now you're down to 5 teams battling it out. And the Rangers, I believe that Capo Caco and Lafreniere, one of those guys is going to have a step-up season, 50-some points, high picks, lots of those guys. You're 20 years of age. There's such a big difference in development for young players. And I like what they've done elsewhere in their roster. They've gotten more physical, which is what they wanted. They got young goaltending. The Rangers, the only reason they don't make the playoffs is if they stub their toe for the 3rd straight year and Zibanejad sleepwalks through the first 2 months. Now, I know he had COVID last year, but if you look at Zibanejad's starts the last 2 seasons compared to what he did in the second half, it's not even close. Like the guy was unreal. He was the best goal scorer in 2019 down the stretch, 2020. So I'm going to say Zibanejad is ready to go at the start, and the Rangers are a playoff team.
Okay, let's just save this clip. The only way the Rangers don't make the playoffs is if they stub their toe in the first part of the season. Got it.
You got it, Frank. I will save this one. I'm actually sticking with the Rangers for the second question. You know me, I'm a bettor. I'm always looking at the betting odds for different players. And one guy who jumps off the page for me for the Vezina Trophy is Igor Shesterkin. If the Rangers are going to be better, I mean, this is a guy who had a .916 save percentage and a .262 goals against average. He's 25 years old. He's entering that age where you can maybe expect him to take potentially another step forward as a goalie. Igor Shesterkin to be a Vezina finalist. Jason, you buying or selling?
I picked the
If
Rangers.
you have
to
them
make
as
the
a
playoffs.
playoff team, then
But
yes.
I'm not buying that one. I just think there's other quality goalies ahead of him. He's going to be a solid goaltender, but I would see more. I need to see more from him before I put him as a Vezina finalist.
I agree. I'm going to sell. I just think there's too many top-end goalies in the league. I think Shesterkin is knocking on the door of being in that category. I don't think he's there quite yet. We still have got the Vasilevskis, the Hellebucks. I'd expect a couple bounce-back seasons from some other guys. So, I'm going to sell.
For those who are wondering about the betting odds, Vasilevsky is the leader at 4-1. Then you have Fleury, Grubauer, and Hellebuck at 10-1. Shesterkin way down the list at 22.
Where's Darcy Kemper?
Darcy Kemper on this one. You're going to make me search while I'm live
Scroll.
on the air.
That's
here.
perfect.
He's actually 12-1, so he's just outside of that top 4.
So throw a couple bucks on Darcy Kemper, 12-1.
Frank's loving the Kemp train this year.
Yeah.
We talked about some teams who are maybe bubble playoff teams here, and Jason, you brought up the Penguins. I'm going to go there. I'm going to say not only do they miss the playoffs, but I think the Penguins might sell at the trade deadline. It could get that ugly with the injuries they have. Jason, buying or selling on the Penguins being sellers?
Oof, Burke being a seller, that doesn't happen very often. You know what? Unless Crosby's injury is more severe than they think, I don't know if I can see them, selling off. They've got a lot of UFAs though. That's the thing, right? They got a boatload of them, but I think Pittsburgh will be in the mix enough. And Brian Burke is historically competitive. He trusts his players, and I don't think they will. I'll say no, they don't sell off. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll sell off. I'm
going to agree with Jay, as unappealing as that is. I just think that in this case, they have a mandate and a mission in Pittsburgh, and it's to keep this window open as long as they can. They're not going to be selling future assets to remain in the race artificially. They're not going to be trying to prop up this team if they're sagging, but they're going to try and give this group every chance, especially with Letang and Malkin entering the final year of those deals. And I think this year, especially the start, is going to be so fascinating in Pittsburgh, because for the first time, we're really going to get a glimpse of what that window looks like without Crosby, without Malkin. If Crosby's out 2 weeks, Malkin's probably out until late January at the earliest. That's a window that we haven't seen with Pittsburgh. What does that team look like without those two guys? And it gives us an indication of what they might look like moving forward.
You guys are both selling, but I'm trying to will this thing into existence, man. I just think for our jobs, it would be a lot of fun talking about, could the Penguins sell Letang? Are they going to sell Malkin now that he's healthy? I just think it would be a ton of fun. Moving on to the next one I got here. Let's stay in Pennsylvania. Neither Pennsylvania team is getting into the postseason this year. I'm going to say the Flyers miss as well, despite their busy offseason. Frank, you buying or selling?
I'm going to sell. I think the Flyers I think if there's the fourth team from the Metro, and just to recap, because I did say the 5 teams from the Atlantic, I've got Tampa, Toronto, Florida, not in any order, Montreal, and Boston. Tell me which one of those 5 isn't making
Montreal.
it. Okay. But
Agreed.
I think that Montreal could still be better than that Flyers team from the Metro, for instance. Because if you're taking 5 spots, you're knocking out a 4th. So I have the Islanders, Carolina, and Wash, like I said, as my teams that are locks in the Metro. And then I think the Flyers are going to be right there, but I think they get in. And if there is a 4th team from the Metro that gets in, I think it would be the Flyers.
Well, you look at the Flyers, all you got to do is just go back to history. What is it, 2022? So it'll be an even year. They always make the playoffs, 20, 18, 16, 14, 12. The last time they made the playoffs in an odd year was 2011. So they're due. They'll make the playoffs. I honestly thought they were the biggest disappointment in the NHL last season. You got to remember, they were on fire down at the stretch in 2020, one of the hottest teams in the league. And I believe Carter Hart's going to have a better season, right? He talked pretty openly about how the bubble and everything was a challenge for him, for sure. And I think The easiest prediction I can make is that Martin Jones is going to be better because it's hard to be worse than an .896 save percentage he's had each of the last 3 years. But Marty Jones will he'll be at least 10 points better. I'm not saying he's going to be great, but if he's a .906 save percentage as your backup and Carter Hart's back to where he is, I just think the Flyers, I like the additions they made on their blue line, and they got themselves Marty Jones, who's fired up to kind of show that he's not the dud he's been for 3 years. The Flyers, I think, are going to be a team, and I say they finish top 3.
Okay, I could see it. I mean, I think they're going to be so much more difficult to play against. There's not going to be any free nights with that blue line that they've built. And if Carter Hart, like you said, can be a little bit better, I'm not a Martin Jones guy. Like we've had too much track record now, 3 straight seasons of .896. Like I don't know why you could point to that, his numbers going up.
Well, to go to .906, Frank, like it's still a low bar when you think about it. Like he doesn't have to be great. He just has to be .906.
Would be like average. Like
No, I think he could be average.
He could be, but we've had 3 years of track record saying he's well below average. So I don't know why he's going to pull it out of the hat now.
Well, you know what's funny? Players, you get into a certain mode, your comfort, all of a sudden you get bought out. You're like, whoa, geez. A little bit of a shock. And I know that he went to some different training again, that he'd kind of gone away from. Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine was explaining the technical stuff that Jones has been working on and, improving his core strength. He worked with the same guy that Mike Smith did, Adam Franchetti, or I think I'm butchering his last name. My apologies, Adam. But that's who he worked with in the offseason. And I'm not saying he's going to have Mike Smith type season, but I think, 906 is doable for him when he's also not going to be the main guy.
Last one here. This one has a bit of a betting edge on it, but last season, the New Jersey Devils were on pace for about 66 points in an 82-game season. I'm looking right now, their point total over-under for next season is set at 90.5. And I get that they got better, but I don't think they got that much better. Like that would be, I'm doing math live on a podcast here, but would that not be like 12 wins better than they were, or at least on pace for last season? I'm selling on the Devils at a 90.5 over-under. I do not think the Devils get to the 90-point mark. Jason, you buying or selling on that?
Yeah, because if they're getting a 90.5, you're thinking there's 6 or 7 teams in one division with that many points. I'm with you, Tyler. I don't think the math adds up. I think New Jersey is going to be improved, but there's only so many points to go around for a team in the division when you still play that many games within your division. So I will go under. I will sell for sure. I don't see 90.5 for the Devils.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think they'll be better. They just won't be that
I think
good.
They're going to be way better. I'd say they're going to be within 5 points of 90 either way. I don't think they're going to be a 95-point team, but I think they're in that range. I actually think it's kind of the perfect over-under setup because I just think Nico Hischier is going to take that next step. You saw the step that Jack Hughes took last year. He was significantly improved last season. It's just that, might not have noticed that much given that he played on a poor team. Their defense is a bit better. Not just Dougie Hamilton. I think one of the best trades of the offseason was Ryan Graves. And Mackenzie Blackwood he's good, man. He's really good. So I don't know. I think that team is, 85, 88, 90. They're right in there. I'm going to sell. I still think they're under 90.5, but I could see them getting there.
There you go. That is buy or sell for the week, guys. It is brought to you by DoorDash, who is not only a proud sponsor of this podcast, but the entire Nation network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. You can use the promo code RUNDOWNDD. It gets first-time users of the app 25% off and no delivery fees. Get your delivery game in mid-season form. You don't want to be like Mika Zibanejad and starting the year slow, not knowing what restaurants to order from. So hit up DoorDash today.
By the way, so we just digested the Metro. There seem to be lots of back and forth about the playoff spots. Better division, Atlantic or Metro?
I'll say the Metro from 1 to 8 because Buffalo's in the Atlantic, Ottawa's in the Atlantic, Detroit's in the Atlantic.
1 to 8, I guess, but top end?
Well, Tampa Bay, yeah, they're the best team for sure.
But it's not just Tampa. Like, I don't know.
Like Carolina and the Islanders, like the Islanders have been in the Final Four the last 2 seasons. Like Carolina and the Islanders, they might be the second and third best teams in the East after Tampa Bay. Like I don't think Boston's better than them. Toronto's not better than them. Toronto hasn't proven anything.
I think Florida's going to be a wagon this year.
I think Florida's the second best team in that division. I would agree.
So Tampa and Florida, and then you think Boston's a playoff team?
They're right on the bubble. Yeah. I think I could easily see, I know you said 5 in the Atlantic. I could easily see 5 in the Metro. Easily. I think it's going to be a great playoff race in the Eastern Conference this year for those 8 spots amongst the both divisions. The wild card race is going to be huge because it's, there's literally 5, maybe 16, well, 6 for sure in the Metro and 5 in the Atlantic. They're going to be battling. So I think the wild card race in the Eastern Conference might be the most exciting we've seen in a long time, and good teams, not somebody limping in or anything like at the 8th spot with 84 points or something like that. I think it's going to be exciting to see, and those games are going to be huge. So yeah, now obviously some team, like I'm not as high on Montreal as some people. I just think the Shea Weber injury really hurts them. Some of the other moves they made, like they had a great run. Don't get me wrong. They had a great Cinderella run. I'm not sold it will continue.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. People called it a Cinderella run, but remember that's the team that started off so well last year that I know that ended up actually being a big reason why they got in.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that team has a decent enough core. Like, they're not going to be out of it at any stretch during the season, I don't think. I know everyone's expecting a drop-off, but I still like some of the moves that they made. I think Mike Hoffman, pencil him in again, 25, 27, 28 goals. Like, take it to the bank. Cole Caulfield, you get a full season. Nick Suzuki takes another step to the next level. And then basically what you need is for David Savard to basically be like 70% of Shea Weber or whatever that number is. And then Carey Price to get healthy and be healthy. I mean, that team they're not going to be far out of it.
Yeah. Well, we'll look to, you're listening to the DFO Rundown brought to you by Fantrax. Before I go today, Frank, here we are. Camps get going with medicals and physicals on Wednesday. On ice will happen on Thursday, and we're seeing more PTOs. Some were announced over the weekend, of course. Flora Frolik and James Neal are now, of course, with St. Louis. Tyler Ennis goes to Ottawa. You got Anisimov in Colorado. Man, New Jersey's got 4. They got Frederick Gauthier, Mark Jankowski, Jimmy Vesey, Tyler Wotherspoon, Colton Seviers in Edmonton. Which PTO do you think has the most probability of working out in the player signs with that team? Who do you like of all the PTOs?
Jimmy Vesey in New Jersey. I think that's a real good chance. He played 50 games last year between the Leafs and Canucks. I mean, I know he's 28 now, but he's still 2 or 3 seasons removed from a 17-goal year. I think if he gets put in a spot where he can find his confidence again, that he could still be a player in this league. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say Brian Boyle makes the Pittsburgh Penguins at age 36. After not playing last season, he played in the Worlds. I know the foot speed isn't there, but I can tell you that the Pittsburgh Penguins really value their center position. They place a serious priority in that, and they've got some young guys that still need to prove it. But with Crosby out, with Malkin out, I just think that there's an opening there. You've got Jeff Carter that's going to be asked to do a lot. And I know this is another older guy in Brian Boyle, but just as a security blanket, even if he only hangs on for a month until Crosby's back and full strength, I could see Brian Boyle on a league minimum deal out of camp.
Okay. I'm going to go James Neal in St. Louis. I believe that.
Why?
Well, he kind of fits what the Blues are. The Blues have never been a team that, like, James Neal's not the fleetest of foot. I don't think he's as slow as some people say either. But like James Neal has scored 24 goals in his last 84 NHL games. At the end of the day, scoring goals matters. Now, you can talk about it on the power play. That's fine. What's going to happen long term with Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis? Who knows? But I look at, like, they still haven't signed Robert Thomas. Now, maybe he'll get signed or not, but they've only got, 12, 13 forwards who are NHL guys signed right now. So I think James Neal can go there. And then Colton Sevier in Edmonton, because Edmonton has very little right shot depth on the wings. And, because if one of their right wingers gets hurt, they don't have another right winger. And they only have 43 contracts right now. They've got a few guys on AHL only deals that don't count that'll be in Bakersfield. So I think Colton Sevier could be a guy who signs a 2-way deal, So on the off chance if he doesn't make it, you put him on waivers. He's in the minors for a little bit, but they'll need some right shot depth. And Colton Sevier, they don't have anybody who's like a bottom 6 depth winger after Cassian and Archibald. And if one of those guys isn't able to go this year, then I think Colton Sevier slides into Edmonton. I
love the PTO stories. I root for those guys. It's so hard when the deck is stacked against you when you come in.
Yeah.
It's really hard to make it. And, especially at where some of these guys are in their career, a lot of them, this is their last shot. So, they're going to be prepared, and we'll see.
What about Josh Ho-Sang in Toronto and Jack Johnson, who I know is not very sought after very well by the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. If you're looking at the information numbers, they haven't been great to him. But Josh Ho-Sang in Toronto, Frank, do you think he signs?
I don't, but I mean, there's always been so much talk about Josh Ho-Sang and all the talent he has. If they can find a way to put it together, it's just that even when he went overseas, when he played in the AHL, he hasn't been a super productive player the last 2 seasons. So I just don't see it, but who knows?
Another one that intrigues me is Artem Anisimov in Colorado. Like, you look at big center depth, guys who kill penalties, aren't flashy. I could see him signing.
How much he has left in the tank.
Yeah, but you know what? I think Colorado, that might be a player that you just, you sign for cheap. He's a depth guy, and you think he can help you. And like, I look at Michael Handzus when he helped the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013, right? Like, and I think Handzus is a better player overall than Anisimov, but it's similar. Like, guys who just know, who are big bodies, who can just fill lanes and fill spots and do a lot of the small things that coaches really rely on and trust. I could see Anisimov signing in Colorado. They've got enough top end guys, right? Like, their elite talent in Colorado is off the charts good. There's no question it's the best in the Western Conference. I think maybe they need a little bit more, like Nathan MacKinnon talked about it in the past. I don't know if he talked about it this year, Frank, that Colorado felt their organization, like they need to do some of the harder things better, right? Some of the more boring aspects of the game better. And I think Anisimov can do that for you.
Interesting. And you mentioned harder. One of the things that stood out for me talking to Nathan MacKinnon at the Player Media Tour was to bring this all full circle. He said when push came to shove against Vegas, his words, not mine, he said we were timid.
Yep.
And that's really interesting. So
it's, you look at, even a guy like Tyler Ennis in Ottawa, they've got so many, like Tyler Ennis can score you 10 to 12 goals a year, right? He's not going to kill penalties for you. He's not going to be great defensively, but if you're just looking for some offensive depth, and if the Tkachuk contract doesn't get solidified here before the start of the season, they might say, hey, we need another depth guy. He's not going to cost us very much. They know him very well. Like, Tyler Ennis is a good professional guy in the room, right? He's never a distraction. Everybody likes him. He's a pro's pro as far as whatever his role is. Like, if you need a guy in your second unit power play, he's got great offensive skills. He's never lacking of offensive confidence. Like, Tyler Ennis can sit in the press box for 2 weeks. He'll come on the ice, Frank, and he'll feather passes. He'll try everything because he has so much confidence in his offensive ability. And I think teams like guys that they know, right? So I when it's all said and done, I could see like 5 or 6 of these guys signing NHL deals when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you.
Yeah, I wonder if any of them can become the Alex Chason. Remember, he went to Edmonton on a PTO, turned that into 3 years and scored 22 goals 1 year. So lots of these guys, just because you're on a PTO sometimes doesn't mean you're done. It means teams, for whatever reason, they spent big in the first week of free agency and they like you and they don't have room. And I like your Brian Boyle pick, especially with the center injuries in Pittsburgh. And he is, like, you want to talk about glue guys that everybody adores.
Yep.
I'm not sure there's a more likable guy in the league right now than Brian Boyle. Like, every player I've ever talked to just raves about Boyle.
And I think teams were pleasantly surprised with how he played at the Worlds, that they were like,
Yep.
Okay, like maybe this guy gets a chance. Maybe we'll give him another crack. So, I mean, again, he's not going to be winning any races, but he wore the C for Team USA and, 3 points in 10 tournament games, 2 goals. Like, again, fourth line, just a guy that shows up every night and works.
Well, Frank, that wraps up another edition of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Fantrax. It's the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry. It offers the greatest season-long fantasy experience for your dynasty keeper or redraft league. So if you want to get in, do your draft now before the season begins. You got to get into fantrax.com/DFO Rundown. If you go there, you sign up and you're entered to win the autographed Nathan MacKinnon jersey. Now, I don't think he signed it that says no pizza or not, but that would be pretty cool if he did, Frank. But either way, you're getting a pretty unique.
Big Z is a donkey.
That's a good chirp. I like that. That's a funny chirp. Everybody knows it's laughing. That's awesome. So, Frank, we will talk with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Saravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode. Delivered by DoorDash.